Light novel. So, when I was younger and being a manga fan growing up in the generation of Harry Potter boom, it always has surprised me to know why, despite being a non-visual medium, light novels are actually far from anywhere sophisticated. Granted, this was back when I didn't know dumb novels exist for just any countries. In these current times, light novels are considered something of a, say, laughing stock of the anime medium. And many would roll their eyes the moment they heard something is adapted from a light novel. And I mean, who could blame them? Oftentimes, you certainly would be right on point to judge a light novel by its cover, and think there's nothing else this book can offer. Exactly because even if you take the time to read it, the only thing you will find is that they put in zero efforts to offer anything different. So, yeah, now I understand that any mediums, be it films, books, Western or Eastern animations, can always have some crap in it. But how is it that this medium of books filled with words intended for adults became known as being far more asinine than picture books of people yelling made for children? In this series, I will be answering that question of why light novels are bad. This first video will be about why they are rigged to be bad. The second video will be about how this affects and hurt anime industry. And the third will be about why Isekai, harem, and ecchi are so omnipresent. Please subscribe to see all three of them. Now let's dive right in, shall we? So first, we should look at just about how you become a light novel author in the first place. We will be looking at the two most prominent ways, the Shinjin-sho or newbie contest, and the web novels, and how both are unintentionally, yet systematically rigged against newer ideas. Let's look at the more classic method first. To recruit new writers, all light novel companies run contests either annually or semi-annually, where hundreds, if not thousands of applied novels will be read first by a different level of judges. These judges will help filter out the novels in each round, and the judges of each round would have increasing experience and importance, with the final round judges being editors or some other established author under their label. From there, the top 10 or so will be selected for publication, with the top winner being awarded 3 million yen, the second place 1 million, and so forth. So far so fair, right? The best guy wins. But then at the same time, many of you are also probably looking at the plethora of light novels floating around and is probably thinking, these guys won any kinds of award? And yeah, they did. Some of them at least. Though of course that doesn't mean everyone who got in through this mean we're all terrible, or everyone who failed must be even worse. Just to be clear, I am trying to say it as objectively as possible, but bad in this case refers to the derivative nature of light novels. That most did not even try to be original and not only just copy-pasted overused trope from other people, but also spam those same tropes over and over in the same story. The other thing is the over-reliance on style over substance, but that can be more of a subjective thing. Though I will point out that the numbers of light novels even attempting to be smart is staggeringly low. So this is about the attempt or the lack thereof. Light novel contests limit the page numbers of the work you are allowed to submit in a range of 80 to 150 pages on Microsoft Word, which usually translates to 200 to 300 pages on book. This of course is just fair. You wouldn't want to allow a submission of a 1,000-page manuscript after all. No one ain't got time for that. The problem here though is that they will not look at anything outside of those 150 pages. Your story doesn't conclude in 150 pages, any threads left hanging, any characters yet to be developed. Those are all automatically considered a liability and can, and in my experience, will lead to so many points being taken off to the degree of disqualification, regardless of other outstanding merits. You may think that this is also appropriate, considering they only asked you for 150, so why would they care about what you can offer outside of that? But really, think about it. This form of selection actively discourages long-term planning. Any plot lines, any character developments you have in mind must be rushed to conclude within these 150 pages and no more. The result is that you don't have time to build up a deeper characters, build a world, and build up a complex plot. I mean, sure, one of the three, possible, but then the other two is gonna hurt. You have an elaborate sci-fi setting you want to explore, you made a new magic system with complex origin, mechanics, and intricacies. Your story has lore that involves dozens of characters in multiple factions. Too bad, the judges already locked out the moment that third unfamiliar name popped up. You want to write a romance where the characters actually take time to develop a relationship? You want to write a character who started off being a douche but gradually grows into a better person? You want a character that starts off weak but grows stronger at a believable pace? Gotta do that 150 then. This includes going for any gimmicks in your writing. Anything from non-linear story, multiple POVs, or hell, even expecting the judges to figure out the symbolism, morals, or commentary is essentially suicide. The basic number one rule of story writing is that almost every scene and event should be there either for the sake of advancing the plot or give the reader some information on the characters, the situation, or setting. But light novels, especially in their highly limited page count of the contest, can't, or rather, doesn't even want to follow that rule, since oftentimes it put priority on enabling the reader to jerk off, figuratively or literally. Therefore, instead of every event being for the sake of advancing the plot or character, it's more about pleasing the reader from moment to moment, with as little setup and consequences as possible. The only upside to this is that it made it easier for the judge to evaluate a book without having to ever bother remembering a single character name. Basically, the judges are looking at your book with a TLDR mindset, and it shows. Ironically, despite many of the companies acknowledging the monotony of the modern market and are all saying that they'll give special attention to ones with good ideas, it goes right back to the same issue. Even if you have fresh and new ideas, if you can't wrap it up in 150 pages, give out your A game from the get-go, then you're already a goner. The different tiering of judges is also to a detriment. Most companies will be transparent and outright say that due to the high volume of applicants, the professional editors cannot read all of them and will often serve as the judges of the final tier, when the numbers of applicants have already been thinned down to less than 20. This means the judges in the first and the second tiers aren't professionals. They're not interested in what you can give the company long term, and yet you are nevertheless pushing dozens of books of massively varying qualities for them to read. So no wonder that the people would just develop a checklist to grade them. You know, like a school teacher in an essay. They already know what they want, so anything not on the checklist just mean minus points. This doubles down on how elaborate the characters, worlds, scenarios, and themes ironically become dead weight. It's just throwing more text for these people to process when they know they shouldn't be invested. Not like they're gonna get paid more for actually paying more attention. The only important thing is how entertaining it is from moment to moment. They'd rather be reading about how the protagonist is having his face stuck in a girl's boobs than about foreshadows and subtext. Though to be fair, it is an exhausting job, and I'll give them that. But that just points back to how this is a broken system to begin with. If it is something they're unfamiliar with, then it is also something they aren't equipped to evaluate. That's why when you actually look at the winners of the contest, it's often less about who has the best ideas, but who can write the best seinen isekai. If you have a long-term plan or writing style to differentiate yourself from the others, you know, as a writer who wants to have a long, successful career, then the best bet shouldn't be to put all your good ideas into one basket that is the first volume, then have nothing else afterward. It is why many light novel protagonists doesn't grow past volume 1, because their entire growth arc, if there was any to begin with, was forced to be done within that first volume. And now you're stuck with having a static character for the rest of the story. The only thing that's allowed to grow is their power level. It is also why so many light novel protagonists are bland. Relatability is the most important thing about them. They're meant to be the empty shoe for the reader to step into, and therefore, having a personality that is too extreme in any direction would just kill that. This is why light novels so very much emphasize on making things as easy to understand in as little words as possible. This means setting your world in a stage everyone already knows. School, magical school, or just look at Isekai. It's a genre that should allow for infinite possibilities for unique and new settings, but everyone just ended up returning to the standard Dragon Quest as JRPG because it's something everyone is already familiar with. Then for the characters, you just use the old archetype that doesn't need build-up or introduction, like the bland protag-kun, childhood friend, imoto, tsundere, ojo, and the one that only exists for the sake of boob jokes. Then for the plot, you just recycle the same thing everyone already did a million times. No need to put in any extra efforts. That is why light novels, despite being a text-based medium, generally ended up being less subtle than something like mangas. They don't want to read between the lines, they don't want subtext, they just want everything to be as obvious as a red sucker in space. So you may ask, how did this an effective system came to be? It originated from the same format of contest used to recruit normal novelists, and because the Japanese are always obsessing with the good old ways, that system just is carried over the whole horse for the light novels as well. But in standard novels case, the system actually works. That is because for one, standard novels usually not only have twice, thrice, or quadruple the text count of a light novel. Take note here. On the left you see a standard novel with smaller font, double paragraphing per page, while light novel have bigger font, far more space, and single paragraphing. And not only that, the average standard novel is meant to be a one-off, a one and done deal agreed upon by the author, the publisher, and the reader. Whereas 90% of light novel market is focused on selling serialized stories, where the readers pick up a book and see there's a big fat volume 1 written right on the cover, and therefore knew the story is meant to continue beyond this book. In fact, most light novels these days doesn't even divide each volume into a mini 3-act structure anymore. They just cut up wherever the author filled in enough page quota, then pick it right back up in the next book without any transitions. This is more prominent to novels that came from web novels, but more on that later. The contest system doesn't want you to plan ahead. They don't care that if you put your climax in volume 1, it will only mean your story has nowhere else to go, that you're effectively out of ammo afterward. The idea of planning ahead not only should, but must be kept as an afterthought. So no matter how you look at it, the contest system simply was a poor selection method designed for a completely different product. Yet the publishers have been stubbornly sticking to this method for the last 20 years. It's like having a heart surgery with the exam for your dentist degree. Some areas of skill might overlap, you may end up being called doctor either way, but in the end what you're doing, the skills required, and what your customers expect of you are totally different. Now onto web novels. Web novels are basically novels you put up online, where you're free to update whenever you want. And once a web novel had built up enough of a following to attract the company's attention, they would contact the author for the right to publish the story into books. Web novels do not have a restriction on page limit. They do not have to oblige to the checklist of a judge. They can take time to build character, plot, world, and conflicts. They can put in climax, plot twist, and ending wherever they want. Which is why the most successful light novels out right now almost all have their origin in web novels. They can make long-running mysteries. Their first volume doesn't have to be outstanding, but they have the edge of being able to introduce the audience to the world, to the character, to the conflict, to the finer details at a digestible pace. Get them to care first before trying to jump into the big events, so that when the impactful event does come by, when the characters' dynamics change, when some characters die or in a risk of dying, the audience actually cares for it. But does that mean web novels are inherently better? No, because guess what? It's still a goddamn rigged game. Despite being a landscape of complete freedom, web novels are still very much plagued by bad Isekai, Gary Stu stories of one-dimensional characters and short-sighted plot. The first issue is because even as blogs, web novels still has a kind of page restriction. Most web novels readers read them on their phones. That is why it is important that the text doesn't clutter up and become hard to read. This means short paragraphs and a whole bunch of spacings, which yields similar effects in discouraging anything that would require long explanations. And since they're being read on phones, most web novel readers also read them on the go. This means during breaks at work or school, during commutes, while waiting in line or waiting for food, or in the toilet. This means the story should be something that the reader can just put down and pick back up wherever without losing track of the continuity. Which goes right back to the thing about discouraging long setups and encouraging tropes such as power fantasy and edgy that can be spam and give constant payoff without needing setup. And that's not all. There's a worse part. Web novel hosting sites are similarly no better than contests in actually promoting good web novels. That is because web novels hosting site algorithm is actually comparable to YouTube. You know, this soulless machine constantly threatening to dunk your favorite YouTuber into oblivion? It's like that, just even worse. It's a combination of bad scoring system and a bad searching system. If you go onto one of these sites, how do you search for something you want to read? Let's look at this page of Shotetsuka ni Naro, the biggest web novel hosting site in Japan. At first, the biggest part is the monthly ranking, which is the first category you see in the overall top ranking, followed by romance, fantasy, sci-fi, literature, others, and a whole freaking category for isekais. Then if you scroll down, the next is completed stories, then the newly updated stories and the newly arrived short stories. The first thing you may notice is that none of them have pictures. That is because web novel authors aren't illustrators, which is why the only source of information you have on the story before clicking is the title. You get where I'm going now? On this site, the titles are essentially clickbait. The only way for you to get a reader to check your story out is by having long, provocative title that basically summarize your entire plot. This is the reason why light novel titles are absurdly long. If you use non-indicative titles the way mangas do, then people won't be able to tell what your story is about, and chances are they just won't click it. And since that is your only strategy to get the audience to check your stuff out, once they've clicked, you no longer have any need to surprise them. It's like clickbait on YouTube. If there's to be surprises, the clickbait itself has already given it away. There's no more need, no more merits to try and surprise the audience anymore. That is why all you need is one strange gimmick to be the clickbait. And once the audience has hooked, you can just resort to cliches. On top of that, there is this ranking, which is the actual broken part. You know how some YouTubers say they don't care if you dislike their video, because a dislike will still count towards viewer participation and help bump them up the algorithm either way? It's exactly like that. Shotetsuka ni Naro has a star-based rating system, but the total score of a story is based on the total amount of stars. Yes, total amount of stars. Which means you can have 100 people review bomb it with 1-star reviews, but the result is that you just gave that person 100 stars to help them up the ranking. Then outside of the stars, you can also gain additional points by the numbers of the bookmarks. This means the amount of people who basically subscribe to updates whenever the new chapters come out. So like YouTube, This means more than the quality of the content, it is more important that you be able to crank out more content more often. Any content to encourage subscription. This of course also gives bonus by putting you on a newly updated section of your front page. And when you look at the subcategory of the monthly ranking, you can see that there explicitly is an Isekai subcategory under romance, a VR game subcategory under sci-fi, most title under history subcategory of the literature is just Isekai to the past, and it goes without saying that the fantasy and action are all basically just Isekai. This is because of the search function of the site. I mean, if you don't want to use the front page but want to search for something yourself via the search bar, how are you going to find something you like? I mean, it's not like you can just put in, I want something unique. The best you could do is search for some element you are already familiar with, which means the searchability of a story is ironically limited by the reader's imagination and it is hard to tag something completely unique. Yet on the opposite end, the more archetypes and cliches you have in your story, the easier tags you can add and the easier it would be for the common audience to look your story up. So now say if someone wants a childhood friend romance while another like tsundere and yet another like ojo, the simple solution is to make a harem with all three of these archetypes to catch all three audiences. And the more of these broad common appeals you have, the wider you can throw your net. It's why even in subcategories like sci-fi, action, and romance, you still just ended up seeing most of them being isekai. Most notably when the isekai under sci-fi umbrella aren't even settings like space opera or futuristic dystopia, but rather just VR MMORPG game where they ultimately just end up using the same fantasy stage, even when it's technically not fantasy. Think SAO or the mom isekai or Bofuri. It's an attempt to get both sci-fi audience and fantasy audience under a single umbrella, exactly for the sake of gaming the search result. Think of it like being a let's player on YouTube. If you want to be a channel that wants to promote hidden gem indie games, you're just going to be faced with the sad truth that it's going to be harder for people to stumble onto your channel. Even if you spend efforts into searching out the really great indie games, has the best analyses, and put in days of effort into editing your videos. Well, on the other hand, it is much easier to get people to watch your Minecraft or Fortnite videos. Even if it's a zero effort thing that you can just randomly regurgitate on a daily basis, or if you're not even good at either of those games. And even after you have become successful through Minecraft or Fortnite and want to branch out to do other things, that only means choosing to abandon the blessings of the search bar. So you're forced to stick with doing the same thing over and over if you want to remain relevant. Then there is the thing unlike YouTube that unless you have already made it to, say, anime adaptation, it is simply hard to convince people to start picking your story up if you have already wrote something like 50 chapters. They want stories that will be easy to catch up with. I mean, it is the same problem not even One Piece is immune to. This means most Shousetsu Kaninaro novels' success can also be measured in the first 30 chapters or so. If you wrote beyond that and still hasn't caught on, then it is safe to presume you just won't get an audience at all. Because of this, there is this strategy called Ichiwa Gacha, or First Chapter Gacha, used by the authors where they will spam post a bunch of first chapters to different stories and continue writing whichever gets the best reviews, then delete the rest to pretend like it never happened. This of course often means each stories are just tangentially different gimmicks, where the I'm reborn as blank in the Isekai template comes from. And also because of that, it also means that again, the author cannot plan forward. Or if they do have plans going ahead, it would be one that largely apply to a lot of their spam stories, which, well, I mean it's probably generic. Furthermore, there's the issue of time. To get to your debut line, be it contest or web novel, it's going to take a lot of wait. Each contest usually takes 6 months to complete, and most companies only hold a contest once a year. So if you're aiming for a specific place, you only have one try per year to give it a go. And even if you don't care which company you go to, most of them hold their contests around the same time. Around April to June, and then perhaps from September to November for the ones that do host it twice. Yet all publishers invariably say they will not tolerate you submitting the same story to other companies at the same time, and will automatically disqualify anyone they caught doing so. This means it is very possible that if you submit it for one in June, the results might not even come back in time for you to give it another go in September. And in web novels case, if you have to build your reputation from the ground up, then not only is getting popular in 6 months in itself a steep cliff, there is also the problem of the publishers taking notice of you, which could take anywhere from an additional month to, 5 years. This means either way, there is no feasible way for you to actually start making money out of your books in less than 6 months. That's a long ass time, especially in Japan where needs are looked down upon, so many people also just give up and just go get a job elsewhere instead. Or in the case of web novels, writing might just be a hobby you do on the side you never considered going pro with, so the authors who got picked up may never really see the need to go above and beyond the competitors. They write what they like. If you don't like it, don't read it. Not my problem. Something like that. Then there's also the issue that your work also have to wait at least 6 months to get to print. That's a long time of vulnerability where another author elsewhere could have come up with the same idea as you and publish it first. Especially in web novels case. Because it takes time for your work to win both the public and publisher's attention, there's literally nothing stopping some author hack who already managed a debut to take a look at your web novel, steal all your ideas, change up the details just enough for the sake of deniability, and send it right to print long before the publishers ever even heard of your story. And since they are the already debuted professional, while you are still just a hobbyist schmuck, good luck convincing anyone they stole your idea and not the opposite. Especially in this ocean of light novels where accusing people of stealing other people's ideas is already as normalized as brushing your teeth. So now instead of being a promising new face with new ideas, you're now a cheap ripoff of someone else. So yeah, on top of being ineffective, you can even argue that both recruiting methods are harmful to the authors. So in the end, no matter which route you take, if you're actually a writer with a long-term plan, wants to write deeper stories with human characters, then both the contest and web novel sites are doing everything in their power to rig it against you. That will be enough for today. In the next video, we will be talking about what happened after you got selected. How light novels' bad quality dragged down the anime industry and, may I argue, is the cause to the current anime industry crisis. Then after that, in the third video, we'll be discussing in more details why Isekai, harem, Gary Stu, and ecchis are so prominent in light novels. So again, please, subscribe to check those videos out. I am one who believes the current low standards of light novels and the authors and publishers' laziness and refusal to change is what is currently killing the anime industry. Which is why I am seeking to save anime by raising the standards of light novel industry. For more details on that, please click here for the video or check out the change.org page in the description. Thank you for watching and see you next time.